Hey everyone. Well, it has been several weeks, hasn't it? And a dramatically eventful several weeks at that. So it is odd to be recording this and getting ready to publish it. You know, the first week when this should have gone out, we were just here at home adjusting and preparing, and our kids' school was suddenly canceled. We had a handful of trips, coming up, and some just other things. So just kind of adjusting and preparing to that. The week after, I'll be honest, I did not want to add this podcast or my voice to what felt like an overwhelming flood of remote work advice and guides and guidance, most of which, the overwhelming majority of which, is helpful, fruitful, useful, and well-intentioned. But even so, I had the feeling like it was too much. There's a part of me that is regretful of that, specifically because I think that Amir is so obviously mindful and thoughtful about how he thinks about not only the product that they're building and the company that they're building and the way that they treat their people, but the way they think about their users, their customers on the other side of the product. And I think that sort of emphasis on mindfulness and humanity and care has always been important. It's going to be immensely important over the next, number of months, and then for sure, like ideally from now on, human nature and and short-term memory aside, long-term memory aside, remains to be seen. But there is a part of me that regrets not putting this interview out there right away, specifically because of how much I respect Amir and his approach. And so, to that degree, I apologize for taking a few weeks off. The other part of it, don't necessarily apologize for. I'm just talking through my state of mind. Anyway, it's good to be back. I'm not sure what the next several weeks of this show will look like. Your feedback is more important and more valuable than ever. I think I don't want to be tone deaf. I understand and respect that that things are different right now. And I feel that way. I also am finding so much comfort and personal rejuvenation and I'm not sure what the other right word there is, but in focusing on, just blocking out 6 hours to just work on a client project and and ban myself from social media and from, checking in on a couple of Slack communities that I value throughout the day, but just giving my mind a break from the news. For sure, checking in at the end of the day and at the beginning, and maybe a time or two throughout the day. But because I am feeling some comfort in that, I understand that there's probably a good chunk of people who are as well. Like, yeah, look, we understand it's not business as usual, but work right now is a welcome distraction from news and the sense of, feeling productive, building a thing, doing something, feels good. So, all that said, it is very tangled up right now. It's very complex and very complicated. I am genuinely not sure what you all want here. Do you want me to press pause on this project for a while and you'll be there when we get back? Or no, keep it going, and not only keep it going, but just keep talking about the sorts of topics that you've been covering before, outside of the context of a global pandemic. Just talk about the strategies and tactics that are helpful in growing an early stage company. Do that, or whatever other combination of things in there. So, okay, I normally do closing thoughts. This was an opening thought. It felt needed. It felt important. And so welcome back. Enjoy this conversation with Amir Salihefendić of Doist. Hey everyone, and welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros to learn what works, what doesn't, and why, giving you at least one thing to apply to your business first thing tomorrow. My guest today is Amir Salihefendić. Amir is the founder and CEO of Doist, a company that builds productivity apps like Doist and Twist, and they do it as a fully remote team distributed across 25 countries and a dozen different time zones. Amir, welcome to Bright and Early.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Pleasure to have you. It's all mine. So across 25 countries and a dozen time zones, is that roughly accurate still?
It is. And I think we have kind of extended this. We have like probably 28 countries or even maybe 30. And we actually also just hired like a first African person from Nigeria.
Okay.
So yeah, we're quite excited. I think that we have people from all the continents, almost. Yeah.
Yeah. So has Doist been fully remote from the get-go, or what's the background there?
Yeah, I mean, we have been from the early days, the first employees were remote first. I started it from Chile, and I hired my first people in Europe from Chile. Yeah, so yeah, fully remote from the get-go.
What was your thinking for doing that, or how did that happen? At the time, it was not as fashionable, trendy, or I mean, practically feasible. We have great tools today, and so going remote or being remote first is a lot more practical. At the time, what was it that caused you to think and to start running your company remote first from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is I have actually never had a normal job, and I started remote work in 2007. I co-founded a social network with people from Canada and Malaysia. So I was kind of from the get-go, and I was probably 20 something there. That's basically my experience. Is for me, that's the most natural part. Is okay, I have a problem hiring people, and the way I solve this is I hire people remotely, and we make this work in a remote setting. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So maybe, that's basically I grew up on the internet, and for me, that was the natural way of communicating and working with people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were there challenges with running a remote company 13, 12, 11, 10 years ago that you don't have to face anymore because the tools have matured?
Yeah, I mean, when I started this, just to give you a development version of this is Git and GitHub has changed things tremendously. In the beginning, you either sent files over and then you had to manually merge them, and it was just a cluster mess of confusion and problems.
Totally.
And then we got I think it was called CVS or Subversion, which is kind of a bit better, but
Yes.
It just created these conflicts, huge amounts of conflicts. And then today we have this luxury of Git and GitHub, where you can basically work together on very complex code bases and merge stuff together and provide feedback, and everything's just very, very nice. The thing is you could do this in the beginning as well, it was just like a lot of manual work. So we have definitely like improved the stack. And the same thing goes for like design, in the beginning it was just like Photoshop, and then you send like Photoshop files over, and like it was just a mess.
V1, V2, final.
Yeah. And even like you did that like on all kind of like even like documents, like right now you just like send somebody a Google Drive link and you collaborate. Back then it's just kind of like these like back and forth file sending, and usually over email. So I mean, you could definitely like make it work, but it was kind of like early adopter, like you really had to work for it hard to like even collaborate on something simple.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's related to file sharing and just finding a way to collaborate remotely. But communication is one of the most common obstacles that remote teams will face. Whatever remote work survey of the year has come out, you can bet communication is going to be in that top tier of struggles. And so I've been asking other guests, how does your team approach this? But with you, Amir, the answer appears to be, well, we built Twist. So talk to us a little bit about, for people who, first of all, who aren't familiar with Twist, what does it do, and what problems are you trying to solve with it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like we are still a very small company, investing in a whole new tool, and especially a communication tool, like it's really, really complex. Like we have been at this for like 5 years now. And we still have like a long way to go. It's a really, really challenging problem.
It is.
But yeah, the problem for us is like we were actually one of the early adopters of Slack. And we could just see so many problems, and like people were just so stressed. I was like very stressed. Like the whole, one-line communication model, especially across time zones, especially like for deep work, like it didn't really fit together. So we were just like, this can't be a solution. So we were just like, okay, let's see if actually somebody has solved this like in a like more meaningful way, like, more asynchronous way. And then we looked, and then like everybody's just like copying Slack. Nobody's really like, thinking from the first principles and thinking like, how do we solve this problem like in another way? So that's actually like the motivation for actually going on this like insane journey, and especially like it's insane right now because we are competing against companies that have almost unlimited resources,
Right.
But yeah, the only reason why we are still in this because we have a very different model and very different mindset, and we are not just copying Slack. We're kind of like going all in on like this asynchronous way of communicating. A lot of the communication inside Twist is kind of very deep and like it's long format, and I like, for instance, like a designer goes in and then like presents his best idea of something, and then somebody thinks for a few days and then presents another like challenge to that idea. So it's not like these fast one-line communication. Because honestly, like I don't really think the best work is made that way. Like you really, in order to create great work, you need to kind of think deeply, and the same thing goes with communication. So I hope I answered that question.
You did definitely. I guess so. One question I would ask though is, what's the best way to put this? Because I agree with you on the thing about Slack is that it has definitely encouraged and moved us towards this immediacy of one line. And people say, all the time that they're afraid to not check in on Slack regularly because they don't want to miss something. Like they don't want to miss a conversation that's happening. They don't want to have the opportunity to chime in and have their viewpoint not heard, particularly with remote companies where those conversations are happening, around the clock. And so one response to that is to say, we're not going to make decisions on Slack. It's for real-time collaboration between small teams. Deep discussions are going to happen on over email. So what is it about Twist that is better than saying, look, just quit having these conversations on Slack. We're going back to email. What are the use cases that Twist is hoping to solve there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And honestly, like, the thing is, like, I have grown up working together over email, and like email, has huge amounts of problems as well. So one of the problems is basically like not being able to link to past discussions, and not having like a common thread, because everybody has their own version of like a thread.
That's right.
And then you have like these formatting issues as well, where you have just like these huge discussions, and everybody has their own version. There's like no global version. You can link to it. And then also the whole formatting is kind of broken as well. So yeah, I mean, email is great at some things, but like team communication, deep communication, like building a knowledge base isn't that. And then also like email has some other problems. So like you still want to kind of have like direct messages with people. And Twist actually has that like group messages as well, where it's like more, casual. And so yeah, I mean, basically what we have taken with Twist is kind of the best things from email and the best things from like chat, and combine that into kind of like asynchronous tool. Yeah.
Yep. Does do you all use email at Doist at all, or have you been able to completely effectively shut it down for all internal communications and it's only for external?
Only for external. Like nobody sends any emails. Yeah.
I mean, so that's quite the endorsement for your for Twist. That is the thing about Slack, and I use it, but I also hate to use it. Sometimes like it is a fantastic piece of technology. But it's like it has moved us in a direction of just skimming the surface of communication and not going deep. And you said it before, and I've heard you mention this in other interviews as well, that you've only seen people copying Slack and not going back to first principles in designing a communication tool. So, what are those first principles that you're designing from? You've kind of mentioned enabling deep work, formatting, linking. Like, what are some of the other principles that you're thinking about?
I mean, honestly, I think like one of the core problems with Slack is, and this is actually for a whole like Silicon Valley, is like the optimization model. So what they are optimizing towards probably isn't in the best interest for people. So basically, the optimization strategy is probably like engagement, or like time spent inside Slack.
Yep.
And if your whole if your first principle design is kind of like engagement and making something very addictive and very sticky, like maybe making such a communication tool isn't really in the best interest for the people. And you can see this like with Facebook or Instagram or any other thing. If you see some of these studies, like people actually get more depressed by using something like Facebook. Like it maybe does not really add actually any positivity to our social interactions. Like, right. And the same thing with Slack. It's kind of like it's very, very fun and addictive, but that should not really be the core of like a work tool.
Right.
It can kind of be a side effect. So I mean, that would probably be it, like being very mindful about like what are you designing and why are you designing it, and like really also taking care of like people people first instead of like metrics first or whatever else they have like going on there.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth there at the end. I was going to say it's really clear. I mean, in this interview and other interviews of yours that I watched, and in your writing, that you are leading Doist from a very mindful position and creating products that are mindfully oriented. You wrote an excellent a very honest article called "What Most Remote Companies Don't Tell You About Remote Work." It talks a lot about your experiences with loneliness and remote work. It's a great. I think the reason I like that article so much is because a lot of times we see, the curated lives of remote workers in Bali or cruising around the country in their, redesigned Airstream. It looks great, and it is. It often is. That's fantastic. But there is this other aspect of remote work that managers and employees need to be prepared for, and you talked about that in that article, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think only focusing and promoting the positive is the wrong approach. Yeah, and I think also it can really set people up wrongly. So if you think this is going to just be drinking pina coladas at the beach, then the reality will be very different, and you will see this is this is a work environment that you kind of need to design, and you need to know what. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think to make remote work, you need to be much more disciplined in designing your own life than in regular work. And if you don't do that, then you can just create some very, very bad habits, and it can basically spiral out of control very quickly. Yeah. So I mean, I have been part of this, journey myself. So for instance, I actually don't really work from home. I work mostly from offices because this helps me create a separation between the two. And there's a lot of other hacks. Maybe for some people it doesn't really work. They want to work from home. They have a room where it's their work mode.
Right.
And then also having social interactions, going out with friends, doing something. Because if you don't have those in, then suddenly you will create very bad routines, very basic, working all the time. You're home alone all the time, and this we are not really built as humans for these kind of environments.
No. Yeah, we're social animals. In our DNA, even the most introverted person needs some sort of social interaction. Do you screen for that during hiring in some sort of way? Are there certain questions that you ask to be able to discern if this person is going to be a good fit for working remotely?
Yeah, we don't really do that because I mean, you should it's very hard to actually know that. And even with past experiences, but a lot of our people actually that get hired, or they have past remote experience. So sure. I think that's a good indicator that somebody can actually do it, or they have been freelancing or having their own project or company. That kind of also sets you up for a remote position.
Yeah. What about on the practical side of things? Do you ask, or do you make sure that Doist employees either have a dedicated home office space or provide a co-working or office stipend, or what's your involvement there in the practical piece of having a place to work from?
Yeah, I mean, we cover their co-working space.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. But this said, even with this, it's basically a free thing they can do. They don't need to pay anything for this. Very few people actually take advantage of this. And if you look at the remote stats, most people work from home. It's kind of it's we provide this, but not many people actually want to do that. So it's kind of strange. I don't really understand this because I don't really like to work from home. But it seems to be a thing for most people. They just like to work from home.
Yeah. I go back and forth on this so much. I mean, we're talking here. I'm in my home office right now. But I definitely noticed it's so convenient. There's no commute. Boom, I'm working. But I'll go all day without leaving the house. And there's something about that. But then I'll be inconvenienced by trying to go to my co-working space and realize, I left that notebook. It's in my office. So it's going back and forth. I've got to figure that out. But it sounds like for you go to an office regardless of where you're working from. And that's what has settled into your routine.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think that my mode is kind of very different. Like, it's kind of like, I go in and then like I'm super focused. I only think about work related stuff. So for me, it's kind of like also that, like, in kind of to get into the zone. That's how I get into the zone. Like, I separate from that. And if I'm home, and especially I have 2 kids, it's kind of also very hard to, like, get into the zone, and I get interrupted very easily and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But even before that, like, I really like this separation, like, but that's the beauty. Like, we are not all the same, and like we can design our environments as we like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are multiple ways to set up work-life boundaries physically for people that work. I think that, so what I want to ask you about now is more about the conceptual work-life boundaries. And so, like, the great thing about working remotely, you can do it from anywhere. And remote workers, we make sure that we can address any problem, from any place. The bummer of that is that then, even when we're at home, like within 5 minutes, you can probably spin up your work life. How does Doist address this issue of establishing and maintaining healthy work-life boundaries?
Yeah, Brian, that's a tough question, and like, honestly, like, I don't really think as a company you can do much to do this. I think, like, having a company that works asynchronously first, as Doist does, helps a ton, because there's like no pressure to respond right away. And this means, like, I can have like this meeting for you and people will message me, but there will be like I would not have this anxiety of like going in and checking in and seeing, like, am I blocking somebody? Has some like a question for me that they need to answer. So I think, like, as a company, that's basically how we deal with it, is like we are asynchronous first, and we don't really set like expect people to respond right away or be online all the time. You can actually even see when somebody's online, like, you don't really know. The only expectation we have is like the people answer back in a day. So that's basically
Okay.
So you don't go like days without like being stuck on something or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you, if there was codified expectations of, we don't want people feeling anxiety for having to check in on notifications. However, get back within, and it sounds like it's 1 day.
Yeah, and this works like greatly across time zones, and also something like, for some problems here, you want to have like a Zoom call and just like chat it out. So it's like you can't really go like fully asynchronous either. So I think, like, you need to kind of have this balance, and of course, like, in the early journey of asynchronous, like, we were very zealous, like, meetings are forbidden, like everything needs to happen asynchronous, and then like backfired very quickly, and like people were just like, oh, this doesn't really feel right, like there's no connection anymore, like human values are gone, like
yeah.
So I think definitely, like, you need to have like default asynchronous, but you still need to have like Zoom calls. You still need to have chat sometime, because this builds like connection with people and stuff. And you also like need to meet people. I think like meeting people is also very critical.
What's like for all hands meetings or certain Zoom calls where not everyone on the team can be a part of it. I assume that it gets recorded and then shared somewhere, or how do you make sure that members who, for time reasons or availability reasons, can't join a call, that they don't miss out on the conversation or decisions? What's that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, we don't actually have all hand meetings. We don't have like meetings for the whole company, and some meetings, like team meetings, they are recorded and shared. So basically Zoom is a great tool for that. But honestly, like a lot of our core communication happens in written form. I think this is also very important for remote work. It's kind of like you need to nail the written format.
Yes.
Yeah. And even, like the human history, like if you look like the printing press, like a verbal communication is great for some things, but actually what has actually created, our modern society is the written form.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. I mean, knowledge sharing exploded with the printing press because of the medium. That's pretty fascinating tie in there. We just have a few minutes left, but there are a couple of questions I want to ask about. Another one, kind of practical, is like, what's your process for calling an emergency leadership meeting? Like everybody is intentionally spread across the globe and probably intentionally ignoring notifications from time to time. But if there's a legit company, leadership level emergency, and we need to get on the phone in 2 hours, practically, like how would you execute on that?
Honestly, like in 12 years I have done this, we haven't done a single time that kind of emergency. Like I have everybody's number, but like I'm unsure what would happen for me to actually use this kind of like. We do have like a Telegram room for our DevOps and like developers where we can basically call an emergency and say like something has gone horribly wrong. We need to look at this, and even like call a developer, like a DevOps person. But the thing is, like, we're using this like a few times per year. And regarding like the leadership, is kind of like we are just not operating that way. Like there's no emergency where you need to have like an answer right away, or like you need to start. And honestly, like I think also this creates like much better decision making, because nothing is kind of like a red. Like maybe it's a red, but like people have time. You get maybe a written form of it, and then you can kind of like process it and answer back. And it's not like your boss calling you at 3 a.m. and saying like this is completely wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you all do schedule company retreats or summits once, twice a year, or what's your structure there?
We do them once, and we do them kind of like in exotic places. So we have been like to Iceland, to Chile, to Menorca, and they are like so fun. Like those are probably like my favorite like remote work moments.
Yes.
Just meeting people that you work with all year long. And then we also starting to do like team retreats, and they're also like a bit less exotic, but still like people have done them like in Budapest, in Amsterdam, in Montreal. So it's pretty nice, and like people are just coming from all around parts of the world and just like attending these. And that's why I think like this, like meeting people and building like a bond is very, very critical.
Yeah, for sure. What did you do in Iceland? That's one of my favorite places in the world that I've been. What all were you doing there?
I mean, we did like a lot of like nature seeing, like seeing the waterfalls, and like then what did we do more? I mean, so basically like our stuff is also like it's basically like team bonding. So like we do dinners and drinks, and like it becomes very comfy, and like it ends up like at 4 a.m. on the harbor. So I mean, basically nothing like this, nothing like extreme. Like we were also like river rafting there. That was also really fun. So
So, I mean, it's such a great benefit that you're able to do that sort of company retreat and probably still come out on balance better than if you had, putting all this money into real estate and offices all over the place. Like, such a fantastic cultural benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's much, much cheaper than like the office space, especially like for the amount of people we have, and like even like living like for instance, if we were like based in New York or like San Francisco or London, like just like the cost of living there.
Right. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. How can listeners find and follow you online, Amir?
I think Twitter is probably the best. Like I'm Amix3K on Twitter. Yeah. So that's basically it. Yeah.
My guest today has been Amir Salihefendić. Amir, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, it was really fun and some great questions.
All right, let's do some closing thoughts here as well. I just really liked hearing Amir think through the process, the design process of not accepting Slack as this baseline. Let's bring it down to some first principles and think through how we want people to communicate, how people probably want to communicate. Slack is amazing. It's got all of these benefits. It's probably also safe to assume that as a design wise, they are optimizing for engagement within that application. When in fact, there are a lot of people who use Slack who would get more done in a day if they were in it less often. And so it's kind of interesting to think about. So at the previous startup I was at before, I've been consulting and working for myself for a couple of years now. And the previous startup that I was working on with my co-founder, couple of co-founders, is that we ran into this thing where, the less times people spend in our app, the better job it's doing. That's gonna present some issues when it comes to presenting our progress to our investors. Hey, we made it. So it was a search tool, and we made it so that our customers this month spent 38 less minutes using our tool than before. That means that we helped them find what they were looking for faster, and then got them back to work. And so there's like essays worth of nuances within those two sentences that I just said. But I relate to the kind of the conflicting messages there of the less people use our thing, then the better it is. So that's kind of it's an interesting thing to think through. I love how mindful said this in the interview, said this in the opening thoughts. Like, I just have so much respect for people who are in tech, building software and building and creating things that are good for the customer. Not necessarily good for their productivity. Yeah, totally. Not only good for growing their business and getting the word out there. Yes, essential to being a sustainable business. But just thinking about like the well-being of the person. Justin and John at Transistor had talked about this a lot in the early and middle episodes, I feel like, of Build Your SaaS, about how good it feels that podcasting is a mindful tool. It's slow, by its nature. And definitely there's like the rise of the short bit daily podcasts are on the rise. I don't listen to a single one of those. I don't need one more notification. I don't need one more thing to keep up with. My favorite podcasts are the ones that I intentionally listen to at 1x speed, even though 1.2, 1.5, and 1.7 are there. My favorite podcasts, I don't want them to be over faster. I don't want Overcast to cut out seconds and tell me at the end of the month how much more I listen to because of those things. I specifically listen to them when I'm walking because it slows me down. So I don't know, just most especially now, you guys, find myself thinking through those things even more. I wonder if you do as well. When it comes to, we had a little bit of a conversation there. Amir does not work from home. That, oh boy, does that ever have some additional implications in these days, for sure. There are good reasons for that. But what I wanted to talk about was he did say he feels like it's hard to screen for the characteristics around hiring. certainly there's some truth in that. I think that I would refer anyone who's listening to this episode for the first time and hasn't listened to Bright and Early before, on that note in particular, I would refer you back to the interview with Josh Pigford at Barometrics. I think that he had some great insights around hiring for what Amir is right. It is difficult to screen for. It's hard to get exactly right, but Josh at Barometrics had some thoughts around this, some things that you are able to look for, signs of like a self-starter entrepreneur type, has worked remotely, has worked for themselves before. Those sorts of things, I think, give you at least some level as to whether or not they're likely to. I think what Amir and I would assume Josh would agree is like it would be hard to screen for somebody who's starting to work the first time remotely, whether or not that's going to be a good fit or not. Yeah, totally around, when it comes to working from home or working from wherever, it's important to set yourself up to be able to get into the zone, to establish a routine, to get yourself, your mind, and your physical body itself to switch into, hey, we're going to work now. Get into that routine, and we are not all the same. And my effective environment is going to be different from yours. That reminds me of the interview with Marie Prokopets from FYI, where we were talking about this, in particular, and her recommendation around experiment, find what works. I remember thinking at the time, well, what's difficult about that is like what I am trying to find is a routine. If I just keep experimenting, then I'm never going to get into that routine. And her point is, well, it's that we're all different. Know yourself. Try to find the things that you think are most likely to lead to you being able to work effectively, getting in the zone, and being productive, feeling productive, and then experiment, around that. So, yeah, I mean. What else here? Like on work-life balance and being asynchronous first, and being a mindful company. I hear this in Amir, in terms of like, well, I don't know that we really do, like, what do we do around that? I think that it's like asking a fish, how's the water? And the fish says, what's water? I hear that in Amir. It's sometimes like the feeling that I get with Jason Fried and DHH, and Ryan Singer at Basecamp, where I sometimes feel like the people who are doing a particular practice the best, like the elites within a certain practice, I sometimes actually think that they are. It's harder for them to give practical advice to folks who are above average but not yet in the elite. It sometimes feels a little bit like, LeBron asking LeBron how to dunk, or how to, like, I should have picked a baseball metaphor here because I know baseball better, but like and they're just like, well, I don't know what you mean. Like, you just do it. Like, no, you don't. You just do it because you have this muscle memory, and you were natural to begin with, and and you just do it. Those of us who are practicing and working and are probably above average but not yet elite, there actually are things that you do. There are practices that you can implement. So anyway. Boy, that was a little bit of maybe a bit of a rabbit trail tangent there. Anyway, goodness, it's great to be back. I'm hopeful that that this interview with Amir gives you a lot to think about, is helpful, practical, centering in some ways. As I said, at the outset, truly, your feedback right now is more valuable and more important than ever. Help me know what it is that you all are wanting and hoping for over the next few months in this feed. Thanks so much for listening. I hope that wherever you are staying safe, you are pitching in whatever way that you can, that you and your family, your friends, and your loved ones are healthy and remain that way. And we can do this together, you all. We will get through this. And thanks for listening. And I'll talk to you. Well, to be honest, I don't know if I'll talk to you next week. But I will talk to you again soon.